Got it. Thank you. Okay, we'll get started. Hello and welcome to our webinar, Role-Based Access Control for the Enterprise with Jenkins. My name is Alyssa Tong and I'm with CloudBees. Today's webinar is presented by CloudBees, the Jenkins Enterprise experts and the leading provider for Jenkins Solutions for continuous integration and continuous delivery. Next slide. Our presenters for today are CloudBees Solution Architects Valentina Armanese and Tracy Kennedy. In this webinar, Valentina and Tracy will explain how you could use Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees Role-Based Access Control plugin to securely define roles and access control to teams. You will learn simple ways to set up a mapping between groups from an authentication realm to Jenkins group. Also on hand is Felix Arcos. Felix is also our solution architect and will be answering your questions via the Q&A window throughout today's webinar. Next slide, please. Before I pass it over to Tracy, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points. Today's webinar is being recorded and we'll send out the recording to everyone who registered. If you have any questions, please feel free to input them in the Q&A window throughout the presentation. Felix will answer them in real time. Any questions that we don't get to, we will cover it after the presentation if time allows, and or we will cover it in our follow-up email. So with this point, I will hand it over to Tracy.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. Today, as Alyssa said, we're going to be talking about the Role-Based Access Control plugin. It's sold as part of the Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees product. So we'll give you guys a quick overview of what that is and who CloudBees is, as well as a quick refresher on what Jenkins is. Then we're going to go into our problem statement, talking about some common use cases and pain points that plugin was designed to address. And then we'll do a quick overview of the demo topics. Valentina Armanese will be doing the demo today, and then once we get through the topics, I'll pass it off to her. And then afterwards, I'll give you a quick summary, and then we'll open up the floor to the Q&A session. So first of all, today let's talk a little bit about Jenkins. Jenkins is the #1 CI and CD server on the market today, with over 53,000 active installations and over 900 community plugins. For such a powerful application, Jenkins is actually pretty easy to install. You just need to run it with a simple Java jar command, or you can also deploy it to a servlet container. Jenkins also has native integration with Solaris, Ubuntu, Red Hat distributions, Docker, as well as a Unix daemon. Jenkins was released under the MIT license in 2005, which makes it a free software. And to date, there have been over 500 releases of Jenkins. As for CloudBees, we like to call ourselves the Jenkins experts. We provide an array of products meant to optimize Jenkins for enterprises. This includes one of our products called Jenkins Operations Center, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few more slides, as well as our own bundled enterprise class plugins, which we offer as a part of Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees. We also offer support for open source Jenkins and its community plugins. And during the course of that support, we also contribute code and bug fixes back to the Jenkins community. Additionally, we offer Jenkins training and consulting through our certified partners, and we host Jenkins user conferences. A few of you might have seen us at the Boston Juice this past few months ago, actually. And we'll also be at the San Francisco Juice coming up in October. The team at CloudBees is comprised of some of the top CI and Jenkins experts in the industry, which includes the very notable Keisuke Kawaguchi, seen here. He's the founder and lead developer of the Jenkins CI project. And he's formerly of Sun Microsystems, and now he's our CTO. So one of the products I referenced earlier was Jenkins Operations Center. This product was designed to offer a central dashboard for administrators who need to manage their organization's Jenkins masters. It allows for horizontal scaling of Jenkins across an organization while enforcing security configurations and pushing only approved plugins to a custom update center if you so choose. We also offer Jenkins Enterprise. This is the product we'll be mostly focusing on today, and it is comprised of plugins centered around enhancing open source Jenkins. These plugins fall into a few functionality buckets shown here. Plugins to create a highly available Jenkins master, plugins to enhance a large installation, as well as plugins to secure and optimize a Jenkins instance. The role-based access control plugin falls in this bucket, the security bucket. And here are just a few of the many companies who rely on CloudBees Jenkins solutions. So today we're going to examine some solutions to security problems that many enterprises are facing with their Jenkins installations. Namely, how can I isolate teams on my Jenkins master? How do I differentiate permissions between groups? And how can I use my existing security groups in Jenkins? Now, some of you may be wondering if maybe a master per division architecture might be the solution to the isolation and permissions problems. Simply put, this is not really something we recommend because this leads to something we call Jenkins sprawl, the problem of having an unknowably large number of Jenkins installations spread out all over your organization. Each master in this type of decentralized architecture would have unknown security settings, if they have any security, unknown plugins installed with unknown versions, and once such sprawl spreads, there's no simple way to really rein that in. And just simply put, for most organizations, this is not a good architecture choice. Maybe about 20% of organizations might need this kind of architecture, and those would be organizations that have heavily loaded masters who simply need to split the load. But both types of organizations would benefit from managing their teams with roles. A single master setup, roles combined with folders can provide the desired isolation between divisions, while on a multi-master architecture, as shown here, you can combine the role-based isolation and permission restrictions offered by the role-based access control plugin with our Jenkins Operations Center product, shown here. This allows for strict enforcement of security settings across an entire organization's Jenkins masters, as well as the possibility of using single sign-on to navigate between these masters. But today, we're just focusing on the Jenkins Enterprise plugin role-based access control. So we're just going to talk about how to set these roles up. But if you're interested in learning more about how to use this plugin with Jenkins Operations Center for a multi-master architecture, we actually have a webinar already out that addresses that called Building Resilient CI Infrastructure in the Enterprise. It's posted on our webinars page. So let's get back to talking about roles. The CloudBees role-based access control plugin can solve the problems of isolation and group permissions by allowing an administrator to first define roles at the root or object level. The administrator would then define their organization's divisions as groups in Jenkins. In this case, we see the DevOps team, the Dev team, and the QA teams groups represented as colored bubbles. Administrators can then take away and grant permissions on a local folder and global or root level for each role, and those permissions and restrictions are then propagated to the groups. The administrator can also lock out any anonymous or unauthorized users from accessing the Jenkins master, as shown here. Today, we're only going to cover 4 topics in our demo: external groups, team isolation, technical profiles isolation, and a secret project. When it comes to external security groups, both the LDAP and Active Directory plugins in the open source community allow administrators to configure Jenkins to authenticate using usernames and passwords from an external security realm. Jenkins can recognize all groups that the LDAP or Active Directory user belongs to. The administrator can then use the role-based access control plugin by CloudBees to map Jenkins permissions to these groups, as we'll show in the demo. Without that role-based access control plugin, the full matrix of Jenkins permissions would have to be mapped to an explicit list of users rather than to the LDAP group. Now let's go over a few of the scenarios that my colleague Valentina is going to demo for you guys today. Say we have 2 different teams working in a company, one developing mobile applications and the other developing web. The general idea is we don't want the mobile team to have access to the projects belonging to the web team and vice versa. However, not uncommon for a company to still want projects to be visible by all the teams in a read-only state. In this case, you would only need 2 folders isolated from the outside by setting access privileges. In this case, the teams only have read privileges on each other's folders. They can't create new jobs in the other team's folders or execute anything. Now, in the next case, we'll address the problem of establishing technical profiles for your organization. With the continuous delivery movement, many teams are now involved in the lifecycle of projects: developers, QA, and DevOps. Many companies would like to set up different roles for each of these technical groups for security reasons. A common scenario we often see with their customers is the one described here: developer team and the DevOps team with full access to the jobs, and the QA team with only read and execute permissions. However, the way privileges are actually signed totally depends on the organization and how administrators want to set these things up. In a CD context, DevOps people would have their own jobs to set up a pipeline for deploying an application, let's say in a pre-production environment here. Developers and QA people should not be able to modify or execute these jobs. In this case, they have read access on these jobs only. For the next scenario, we'll show how to completely hide a folder from the outside, granting access to only the developers working on that specific project and the administrators. So in this case, let's say a company is developing a social application and wants to hide this project from everyone else in the company. In this case, only the social project team and the administrator would have read, write, execute permissions on this folder, while the mobile and web team have no permissions, which completely hides this folder from them. All right, and I'll now be turning the presentation over to Valentina. All right, there you go.
Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can use the role-based access control to implement security strategies within your Jenkins infrastructure. First, notice that the web page you are looking at is the Jenkins Operations Center page, which is the master who manages all the downstream masters, which Tracy have talked about before. With Jenkins Operations Center, you can easily push your configuration and your security groups to the client masters. As Tracy mentioned it before, you can either create security groups within Jenkins, or you can import security groups from the outside. Let's say from Active Directory or LDAP. In this case, for simplicity and for purposes of demo, I'm just pretending to be importing some external groups, but indeed I'm using some mock security layers. Once you have created your internal Jenkins users and groups, or you have imported your external groups from LDAP or Active Directory, you can go back to Jenkins. You can start defining roles. So you go to Roles and Manage, and then you have this big matrix. Inside here, you can define roles. For each of these roles, you can assign permission. For example, let's see the administrator role, and you can see that I gave full permission on everything because I want this role to be associated to the administrator group. And then we have, for example, the browser role. To the browser role, we only give permission to read the jobs. But you can create as many jobs as you want, and all these roles, as many roles as you want, and all these roles will be pushed to the client masters. Once you have defined your top-level roles, you can go back and start creating your top-level groups. For example, in this case, I have created an administrator group. The administrator group has been assigned with the administrator role, and the member of the administrators group is only one user, an admin, which is an external user, which for me, it is a fake user, which I'm pretending to be importing from, I don't know, the LDAP or the Active Directory. And also I have a browser group. The browser group is associated with the browser role, and any authenticated user is part of this browser group. This means that any authenticated user can access read-only any jobs. That's because I have defined the browser role to be able to, I have defined the browser role with only read permission on the jobs. Once you have defined top-level groups and the top-level roles, these groups and these roles will be pushed to the Jenkins client. So you can get in the Jenkins client, and you can start focusing on the folder level configuration. As you can see here, I'm logged in as administrator, so I have the permission to do whatever I want. So I can click on the mobile folder and maybe on this job, and you can see that I have the right to configure and build the job. So I have the read, write, and execute permission. My goal now is to demo how you can isolate teams inside your Jenkins architecture. Let's say, for example, that you have two teams, the mobile team and the web team. I, of course, don't want people belonging to the mobile team. I don't want them to be able to access the web folder with write and execute permission. And the same way, I don't want people belonging to the web folder being able to access the mobile folder with write and execute permission. So I want these folders to be isolated. A quick demonstration of what I expect of my configuration. So let's say I am a web developer. A web developer of my demo is Felix. As a web developer, if I click on the web folder, you can see that I have the right to look at the workspace, configure the project, and execute the project, because I'm accessing the web folder and I am a web developer. If I go back to Jenkins and I try to access the mobile folder instead, and I click on a job, you can see that I don't have rights to execute or change the job. I can only see the status of the job. And the other way around. Let's say that I am a mobile developer. Valentina is the mobile developer of this demo. If Valentina accesses the mobile folder, she has the right to do everything. She can build, access the workspace, and configure the job. But if she tries to access the web folder, she doesn't have any rights. So how you can set this up in Jenkins? Let's go back to the administrator window. If you want to protect a folder and to isolate a folder, you just have to get into the folder and go to groups. In this way, you can create folder level groups. In this case, I have created 3 folder levels groups: mobile dev, mobile DevOps, mobile quality and assurance. Basically, I have defined 3 groups because later I want to explain how you can isolate technical groups. But for now, just focus on the fact that all the people belonging to the mobile group will be able to access this folder. And specifically, this group will have the develop role and will be, and as member will have all the mobile developer external group. Remember that when you import some external group, you always have to map them with an internal group in Jenkins in order to be able to assign roles. And the same will be for mobile DevOps and mobile quality and assurance. This means that only people, according to this configuration, only people belonging to these 3 groups can access this folder with a specific role of these groups. But since also we inherit from Jenkins administrators and browsers, which are our top level groups, we also allow administrators to access the folder with the admin role and browsers to access the folder with the browse role. This means that any authenticated user can access this folder with a read-only access. That's because we want to configure our architecture to be visible to all, in order to make all the jobs visible to all the teams. In the same way, if you go to the web folder, and then you go to groups, then you can see that I have defined a folder level group, web developers. The web developer groups has the developer role, and the member of the developer group is the web external group. Again, this means that only people belonging to this group can access this folder with a developer role. And in the same way, since we are inheriting the top-level groups, administrators and browsers, we also allow administrators to access the folder with admin role and browsers to access the folder with read-only role, which means any authenticated user. So now you have seen how you can isolate teams. But I've also made a little introduction on how you can isolate technical profiles. Indeed, going back in the mobile folder, you can see that I have defined 3 different groups: the developer, the DevOps, and the quality and assurance. These different groups are attached to 3 different roles. According to my big matrix, the role matrix that I have defined at top level, the developer role is read, write, and execute. The DevOps role is read, write, and execute, and the quality and assurance is read and execute only. That's because I want developer and DevOps people to be able to modify and execute the job, but quality and assurance people only to be able to read and execute the job, so not to write. This is just a possible scenario. You can configure it the way you want. But let's take a look at a more interesting example where you can implement isolation of technical profiles. So today we are listening more and more about continuous delivery, and Jenkins is taking part of this, the deployment as well of the artifact to the server. So we have DevOps people that have their own jobs. They have their own pipelines in order to take the artifact and deploy it, let's say, to the pre-production environment. Ideally, we don't want people different from DevOps to be able to access these jobs and execute and maybe modify this job. It would be too risky. So we can put all these jobs together in a folder and then set up security strategy on this folder only. So just to give you a quick demonstration of this, I will now try to log in as a DevOps person, Ryan. If I try to access this job, you can see that I have the right to configure, execute, and build the job. But let's see that I log in as someone belonging to the mobile team as well, but maybe to the quality and assurance team, not to the DevOps team. So Steven is our quality and assurance person. So Steven doesn't have any rights. That's because I only want DevOps people to be able to access this folder with execute and write permission. Let's go back to the administrator view. So far, you have seen how you can isolate teams and how you can isolate technical profiles. But all the examples that I've shown so far allow any authenticated users to access in read-only a folder and a job. But what if you want to keep something secret? Let's say the organization is working on a social project and maybe a social community website and wants to keep this project secret and wants to hide this project from all the other teams, but from the administrators and people working on the project. So you can do that. You can hide a folder in Jenkins with the role-based access control. So how can you do that? First, you can see that as administrator, I can see this folder, the social secret project. But if you paid attention before, maybe you may have noticed that with all the other users that I've been logged in so far, I cannot see that folder. So right now I am Steven. I am a quality and assurance mobile person, and I cannot see that folder. Let's try with another user, maybe Valentina, a mobile developer. Again, I cannot see that folder. This folder is completely hidden from both the mobile team and the web team. So let's take a look at the configuration of this folder. Again, I go to groups within the folder social secret project, and you can see that I have defined a folder level group, the social secret project group. And the only user of this group is Stephen. This means that only Stephen can access this job and can access this folder. Again, since we are inheriting from Jenkins the top-level groups, we also allow administrators to access this folder and browser people, which means any authenticated users. But if we leave the configuration the way it is, then any authenticated users could access read-only this folder as well. If you want to filter out this group from this folder, you can do that by going to Roles and then Filter. And then you just filter out the role that you don't want to grant access to the folder. As a quick demo again, let me just log in as Steven, the only user belonging to the secret group. So Steven now can see the social secret project because he's the only one who is associated to this group. So here learn how you can use role-based access control to isolate teams, to isolate technical profiles, and to create a secret project. But you can use roles and role-based access control and play around with the roles and groups in order to meet your organization requirements. So thanks, Tracy.
See, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
In summary, Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees offers a role-based access control plugin, which offers administrators the ability to take and grant permissions to roles. When combined with the Folders plugin, this allows administrators to set permissions on objects, as Valentina just showed you, which allows you the option to create a secret project accessible only to certain developers and an administrator, or to set up team-based access to projects. Additionally, Jenkins Operations Center builds on the role-based access controls functionality by allowing for strict enforcement of security settings across an entire organization's Jenkins masters, as well as the option of using single sign-on to navigate between these masters. So what are the next steps? If you liked what you saw, we recommend going to cloudbees.com/Jenkins to try a 30-day evaluation of either Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees or Jenkins Operations Center. You can also find user guides and videos on our CloudBees developer wiki. The link is down here, developer.cloudbees.com. So now we open the floor to Q&A. Any questions that came in, Felix?
Hello.
Hi, Felix.
So I have one, Tracy. So there's a question from Arthur Martin.
Okay.
And the question is there any settings for views instead of folders?
For views. I believe so. Valentina, can you take that one? Oh, I think Valentina's muted. Melissa, can you unmute Valentina? Thank you.
She's unmuted. Valentina?
Do you hear me or not?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I think that you can only set up security strategies on folders.
Okay, thanks, Valentina. Were there any other questions, Felix, that came in?
Yes, there is one that it is if permissions are only available at folder level.
No. One of the advantages of the role-based access control plugin is that you can set permissions at the root level, which is, I believe Valentina demoed that, as well as the folder level and the grandchild of that folder. You can have folders nested within folders and set permissions accordingly. That was part of what Valentina demoed, like you can prevent child folders from inheriting permissions higher up, which includes the root level.
And also there is another one which says that if role-based access control will work in case you login or a user login using single sign-on.
Yes. Yeah, you can use single sign-on to log in.
Okay, and I don't have more questions here.
I have one. How do you admin the groups? Manually, or is there LDAP involved? And this question is from Michelle Gasser.
Okay, so in the demo, I have just used some mock security rules, which means that I have used some fake users, so I have inserted them manually. But in reality, you will use the LDAP plugin or the Active Directory plugin to import your authentication group within your Jenkins, and then map this external group to internal Jenkins group. Does this answer the question?
Thanks, Valentina. So at this time, it looks like there's no other questions. We do have some time left. If you have questions, please go ahead and input it into the Q&A window or the chat window, and we'll answer them. I'll leave the floor open for a little bit for questions to come in. A question from Mitch Hunt. Is there a permission that lets a user see the test console steps?
I really didn't hear the question. Can you repeat, Alicia?
Sure. Is there a permission that lets a user see the test console steps, the bash CMDS that are executed?
The bash commands that are executed.
Yes.
Yeah, no. Well, you mean the bash commands within a job?
I think he's talking about the console output. I could be wrong. He wants to know if they can see, if there's a way to restrict whether a user can see the console output.
Okay.
Yeah. So we didn't know, you cannot see the console steps that are executed while configuring security strategies.
Arthur came back with a question. I'm not sure if my question was answered. Does the RBAC setting available for views?
So I am not 100% sure, honestly. I have to check, but I think it's not possible. But I can double check and then be back to you.
Yeah, Arthur. So the questions that we wanted to get clarification on, we will put this in a blog, and we'll send you an answer in our follow-up. Another question from Rick Lewis. Are folders the only way to associate multiple Jenkins jobs with the same group?
Jobs, yeah. I'm trying to understand the question. So are folders the only way to associate multiple groups within the same
group? So let me ask the question again. It says, is there a permission that lets users see the test? I'm sorry, are folders the only way to associate multiple Jenkins jobs with the same group?
No, well, you can have multiple jobs and associate to these jobs, the same group, and they don't have to be in the folder. But, I mean, they can be in different folders, and having the same groups accessing to them. They don't have to be in the same folder. You can replicate the groups if you want.
Great. Thanks, Valentina. Okay, we'll give it another minute, see if any more questions come in.
So I got an answer for the views question. The answer is you can set permissions on views. The list of levels in Jenkins that you can set permissions on are Jenkins itself, the root level, jobs, Maven modules and a Maven project, slaves, views, and folders. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So we'll just call it quits for now. So I wanted to thank Valentina, Tracy for today's presentation, and for Felix for being available to respond to questions. But especially thanks to our attendees who spent the time with us to learn more about Jenkins. Like we mentioned earlier, the webinar was recorded, and we will send out the recording in our follow-up email. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you all.